Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fat Muscle Project podcast. I'm John Gorman, one of your hosts today. We got Lisa Franz in the house about to give an awesome presentation. Lisa, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, John. How are you?
I am great. Just got back from vacation and I'm a little bit tired, so I'm glad you are holding the fort down today by presenting. Now, you're in Germany, right? What time is it over there?
That's correct. It is just after 7 p.m., but nonetheless, I'm excited for this week's topic, which is also part of the presentation that I gave at the Fat Muscle Academy in January. The first part I presented a couple of weeks ago in regards to how to bring up a lagging body part, and today I'm going to be talking about my 5 tips for coaching females. So I'm excited to, yeah, share those with you.
Yeah, well, while you get that pulled up and get the presentation up and running, I'm going to go ahead and clue some people in. So we will have coming up our next Fat Muscle Academy, but also our customer appreciation event will be in early 2025. So emails have gone out to our top customers, our top retailers. We even sponsor someone for the year. It's a big deal. So you can always check the show notes to just see more about our page, fatmuscleproject.com. Um, but today we're doing one of these master's classes, and we're going to be doing a lot of these. We just did HIIT versus steady state cardio on my sister podcast, Elite Physique University. I've done a ton of lectures. We just did one on the thyroid, Jason Theobald. So really enjoying these master's classes. And Lisa, this one was very popular whenever you gave this. It's very timely because I think um, there definitely is more of a women's coaching base now, not only women coaching women, but women clients than there. It just seems to be, you just don't see as many guys as clients. Most of my clients, I would say 70% are female, and it's always been that way. So this is definitely a timely presentation. So go ahead and take it away.
Amazing. Yeah, what I want to say first off though is that of course I'm very much generalizing with this. There is going to be outliers for all the points that I'm making, or maybe if you're listening to this and you're like, no, that doesn't apply to me at all. I'm not like that. Then, excuse me, but this is just generally from my own experience of working with hundreds of women over the past few years. Um, and of course, I'm also saying this with the preface of like several things or many things, and the big principles apply for men and women alike. Let's just say calorie balance, let's just say the importance of protein, or just the importance of strength training altogether, or the importance of sleep. But nonetheless, these are specific tips that if you're listening to this as a woman, or if you're listening to this as a coach who does have quite a few female clients, perhaps this can help you, or maybe it just resonates with you as well. So the first tip that I have on here is in regards to meal frequency. And while the research actually does not support that women always need more free meal frequency than men, and we have spoken about this in a past episode also, meal frequency, like what kind of frequency is better in general for all both genders. I have found that for most of the women that I work with, they prefer and do better with a higher meal frequency than men. I have seen plenty of men get away with two, maybe 3 meals per day, especially if they like intermittent fasting, etc. But most women that I have been working with, especially because they tend to be more like go type of women, have stressful lives, and potentially also train quite a bit, train hard. They tend to do better with, eating every 3 hours, maybe three main meals and the other 2 or 3 meals being smaller snacks. Of course, as we mentioned in our previous episode, this also depends on, are you in a calorie deficit or how many calories you have to play with altogether. But just generally speaking, I have seen so many women try to extend their or go for a longer amount of time between meals, especially between like lunch and dinner, having 6, 7 hours at times. And then they come home and they're hangry and they just eat anything that's inside because their blood sugar has dropped so low, and all that they have been running off of over these last few hours is like caffeine, and they're just constantly in the stress state. So by having something in between, especially even if it's a protein shake and a banana, or even if it is, some cottage cheese and a few veggie sticks or so, something small, of course, that also helps us get to the protein goal that we want to reach. I did note, if you're watching this on YouTube, I did note on here that I do want to avoid women from grazing, or anybody actually, because that's the other extreme of women that I know. They never eat proper meals. It's always sort of more like a snack accumulation, where you have like a little bit of protein and then some strawberries, and then an hour later they eat half a protein bar, and then an hour later they drink a coffee with a cookie, and then an hour later. This is not great for your blood sugar levels, and definitely not for your satiation either. So that is the very first point that I want to make. Meal frequency might have to be a bit higher than perhaps what men might enjoy. I also find that men often feel like the feeling of being really full after a meal, or being like fully satisfied, so they prefer to have larger meals, as opposed to many women that I have worked with, they don't like feeling super stuffed. So that's another reason why we might want to split that up a little bit more. Yeah, I don't know. Have you had a similar experience with your clients when it comes to that?
It's interesting. I've never really thought about it like this, so I like what you're saying through experience, because you have a lot of experience with this. As a guy, I know that, in the beginning, when everyone first starts dieting and it's new, I think a lot of people like meal frequency because you're just upset, because you're just hungry and you just want to eat all the time. But as people learn this lifestyle, right? I've noticed the exact thing that you just said. Women like more meals, smaller meals spread throughout, proper meals, like you said, with enough protein, which no grazing, no half a protein bar, and like not just an apple by itself. Like,
Mhm.
but guys having four meals, I would say most of my guys enjoy five meals. Some of them enjoy four. I can do 4 to 5. They don't want to have to plan out as much. They don't want to have to eat 6 times a day. They don't want to, they'd rather just have less, which is totally fine. 5 meals, 4 meals is totally fine. Two's not, but so yeah, I can tell you from experience, now that I think about it, I would agree with that 100%.
Amazing. Yeah, cool. Cool
Yeah.
that without even analyzing, you came kind of to the same conclusion. And another thing that I put on here as well is that I think women also tend to do better if they include carbs in their dinner. I mean, we spoke about carb or macro distribution before, in the sense of we certainly want to have carbs around our workouts. And but there used to be this myth of like, don't eat carbs past 5 p.m. or blah blah blah. And yes, overall, what matters the most, as we know, is how many calories and how many carbs you eat over the course of the day. But I have just found it helps us relax. It helps our hormonal health in general. It helps us um, drift into sleep quicker and recover better throughout the night if we have healthy carbs. So it might be a sweet potato, it might be regular potatoes or whatever, but not necessarily unless you're at the very tail end of your diet and going to bed without having carbs beforehand. That would be a general observation that I have made. I think many people do fine with having less carbs in their midday meal. Of course, it also depends on when you're training, or are you going through a keto phase like you are at the moment, or whatever it might be. But just generally, let's just assume we're here on a normal, quote unquote, normal diet pattern. We want to have carbs around our workouts. And in my opinion, carbs and dinner is going to help us wind down, bring down that cortisol that so many of us highly stressed people have, and also helps us with sleep. So that's a big one. I have not necessarily, I mean, that again is something that probably applies to many men as well, but just specifically talking to the go female out there, and that tends to be my typical client that often is terrified of carbs, but working those back in, or showing that that's actually helpful, has been a game changer for many of them.
Yeah, the other thing too with families, I see this when I work with a lot of families that have kids, and they're trying to make it work so it's not so extreme. And when someone's dying to get on stage, I'm sorry. If your carbs are limited to around your training in the morning, that's to get on stage. 99% of people listening to this don't need to worry about that, right? So like, again, I think you make such a good point. It makes me think about families with kids, and a lot of people want to be able to try and make a healthy dinner and be able to get their portions, and that's going to include carbohydrates for the rest of your family. So I think carbs at dinner is definitely very beneficial in that scenario. And especially to knock cortisol down if somebody's
Mhm.
highly stressed, to start to knock that down, carbohydrates help with that. So I like it. I like what you're saying.
Yeah, and the next point that I put on here is intermittent fasting question mark. Also, because in the recent years that has been such a hype, I think it's kind of starting to die down or has died down a little bit. But many women here are you should certainly make sure you get your 16-hour fasting window, etc. And again, we're talking to someone who's already super stressed. I have not seen that to be, excuse me, to be super beneficial for most women. There are certainly women that make that work with their lifestyle and they've never had an appetite for breakfast and they don't really work out until the afternoon anyway. And that's all good. Like if it's something where you say it's feeling good anyway, then by all means, please do it and it's helping you to stay within your calorie window, etc. Go for it. But if you're someone who is number one, struggling to get their protein in, number two, really just high stress anyway, and maybe even has hormonal issues, please, please, please don't force yourself into that intermittent fasting window without the necessity for that. Yes, go ahead and, make sure you're giving your gut a break for like 10, 12 hours overnight minimum sort of thing. And yes, make sure you're not eating too close to bedtime. Absolutely. But just because someone once said intermittent fasting means 16/8, you don't need to force yourself into it. Just extend your fast for as long that feels comfortable to you, and as long as you're hitting your protein goal, yeah, do what works for you. That's really the main thing.
You brought up a really interesting point probably about 5 minutes ago. So I want to circle back to this. There's this myth out there that you shouldn't eat carbohydrates before bed. And that's been around forever. It's still around today. People are highly afraid of eating carbohydrates before they go to bed. I can tell you right now, working with people for almost 2 decades. So anyone watching and listening, people for 2 decades, I've had them eat carbs before bed if it applies. They eat protein, carbs, go right to sleep, and they get shredded. And here's the thing, people, they wonder this, and this is bro science, but it makes sense if you think about it. Why would I want to eat carbohydrates and then go lay in a bed? I'm just laying there, I'm not doing anything. Well, first of all, if you train in the evening, your body needs to recover. So carbohydrates are going to help fuel that process of recovery, right? But also, your metabolic rate is a lot faster, like the last half of sleep, because your body's going through all these repair processes, and that takes calories. And carbohydrates help fuel that process of recovery. So whenever you add it with a protein, carbs fuel that process of protein synthesis and recovery, but your metabolic rate's very fast, especially the last half of sleep, even though you're laying in bed. So it's just something I want to point out that hopefully it'll never go away. We'll always hear and see this, but it's one of those myths that, man, I wish people just would quit worrying about it.
100%, absolutely. It really doesn't matter or shouldn't matter what time of the day we eat carbs in the first place, but certainly when it comes to 8 hours sleep, we want to pay attention. So the second overall part that is often discussed when we're talking about female training or females physique advancement in general is our cycle, our hormonal cycle. And while there is so much variability to this. I know that it's different from person to person, and generally, a cycle is considered quote unquote normal, anywhere between 23 to 35 days, sort of thing. If you're watching this, I've put up a bit of a graphic here that does just assume your cycle is 28 days in length. And there have been times where people said we should absolutely do cycle syncing in the sense of tuning our training and perhaps even nutrition to where we're at in the sense of our cycle. So if you're in around about your ovulation phase, you're supposed to have more energy for your training. You're supposed to push it extra hard, maybe pushing for PRs, etc. But during period week or even just before your period when you're starting to feel a bit crampy and not as much energized, etc., then almost taking a deload, or some people were even saying that you should you not train at all during that time or during the week of your cycle. And I can just say, and again, this is actually, there's more research coming out about this as well, but I can just say that it is person dependent that we really cannot make this general recommendation of every woman should be cycle syncing, because there are women out there that hardly feel a thing when they're on their period, and there are other women out there who are almost bedridden when they're on their period. So you cannot just say blanket statement, everyone needs to deload during their period, because you might be missing out on a huge window to just continue with your training, and maybe you're even feeling great. And then other women, and when if you just hear, hey, you should really push it super hard during your ovulation window, and but you actually didn't sleep super well and you're stressed with something else, but you think if you don't push it hard here, then you have to wait another month before you can push it. So in my opinion, cycle syncing cannot be just generalized. I would just say listen to who you are, or listen to your client, what their symptoms are, and then adapt from getting to know them. If they're every month they're super lethargic before their period, then cool, program a bit of a deload for them, or just let them go in there and do a bit of an intuitive deload. Or otherwise, the thing is too that it really doesn't just vary from person to person, it really does vary from month to month. So I would just, instead of making this statement, I always think auto regulation is much better. So you give your client or yourself the freedom to adapt as necessary and just to get more in tune with themselves. I think the hard and the nice thing about all these trackers that we have these days with the Aura Ring and the Whoop and so on, as helpful as they are when it comes to our HRV or when it comes to sleep scores and everything else, I don't think that they always tell the truth in the sense of how we feel. We still need to check in with how am I actually feeling before we check those apps. And I used to wear my Aura Ring, or I had an Aura Ring for a year and a half, and I've actually ditched it because I did find myself looking at the score beforehand and then thinking, huh, but I'm actually feeling really, really strong today. Why should I train lower just because this app tells me? But then I would kind of get into my head about this. So I'm not saying you shouldn't be using those. On the contrary, super helpful information, but check in with yourself first and trust your own feeling and your own body more than you trust an app. That's all that I'll say about that. Yeah.
Can you explain autoregulation for our listeners that may not know what that is? Because autoregulation is pretty key with training, I believe, and it's not something that we paid attention to 15 years ago. No one was talking about autoregulation. You just, whatever your workout was for the day, by God, you got the workout done. So if you were on low sleep and you had a heavy leg day, pull yourself up by your pants and in your bootstraps and you get it done. You be a man. And it's like, it's not always the smartest method. So can you explain autoregulation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a little bit like the word already says, it's just you listen to, or automatically you listen to how you're feeling on that day, essentially, and then adjusting if needed from there. So yes, you might still have your training program that might give you an RIR or RPE or percentage in the sense of what you should perhaps push to or what you should achieve, or maybe it's a 1 rep max week or whatever it is. But the most important thing is always, like, before you start your training, think about how am I actually feeling today? And also, um, what was my sleep? What was my nutrition like beforehand? Or how stressed am I about work, etc. So if you start your training and you feel super and you are supposed to push to 90, 95, or 100% on that day when it comes to your lifts, or even trying to go for a new PR, maybe that's not the day. Maybe it's smarter to wait a couple of days or a week until you actually start your training with that energy. And I think most people listening to this, they're going to be more experienced athletes. And for those intermediate to experienced athletes, autoregulation works very, very well. I don't believe we should be autoregulating for the most part when it comes to beginners, because they have a really hard time differentiating between I'm sore or I'm not motivated, and actually needing to take a step back. Because if you're just a little bit sore or if you're just not super motivated, heck yes, you should still push to 90 or 100% or try to go for that new PR. But if you're like, actually, well, I really didn't sleep that well for so many days. For instance, you've come back from your long driving trip, and if your training program today were to say, go for your next PR, you should most certainly not do that, in my opinion, probably. And how you're feeling, I don't think you would achieve any new PRs either.
Yeah, and your risk of injury is just through the roof. But I'll tell you what I'll do. If I really like, if I'm in a fat loss phase and I need to train because there are other things that I just have to get it in, but I'm on very low sleep for some reason or just very tired and high stressed, I will do a high rep arm day and I will get my arms in and get those done. I can do that in 20 to 30 minutes. I know a lot of people are listening like, "Oh my God, how can you only train in the gym for 20 to 30 minutes?" Well, I'm very efficient, first of all, but I can always train high rep biceps and triceps and superset everything and get it done. It's not going to just crush me. If I need to keep my fat loss phase going for some reason because I've got a deadline to be ready for something, right? So, but that's you're auto regulating. So,
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I mean, there are so many ways to auto-regulate. You can just drop the load a little bit, but continue with your regular program. You can, like you mentioned, swap out some exercises that are more stressful for the CNS, for others that are more isolation work. You can change the rep scheme, etc. So in
yeah.
the end, it does come, have that conversation with your coach. But it just essentially means listen to how you're feeling on that day and then either push extra hard or push really hard or take a little bit of a step back, essentially. Um, but yeah, moving on to part number three. Of course, digestion and supporting liver health is really important for anyone out there, but the majority of digestive issues are really observed in women. I think it's something like 70% of SIBO, small irritable bowel syndrome, or intestinal permeability, and all these sort of things tend to be more present in women than in men, and therefore supporting that digestion is even more important. And of course, we want to support the liver even more because women tend to have more hormonal fluctuations, particularly through the years of perimenopause and menopause. So a few things that I mentioned here, or you can see on the screen if you're watching, is number one, I do like to have my female clients eat cruciferous vegetables on a daily basis. So things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, can even be kale or other dark leafy greens that are not necessarily part of the cruciferous vegetable family, but still at least once a day. If you're very sensitive to those, sometimes it might seem like it can cause a little bit of bloating. Pay attention to quantity. We don't necessarily want to go overboard. That's the other extreme I sometimes see where people eat 300-400 grams and then they're wondering why they're feeling bloated. And the other thing is that we don't necessarily want to consume those raw because they're just harder to digest. So that would be the first thing to help your liver with the detoxification and help maintain hormonal health. The other thing is to pay attention to endocrine mimicking chemicals. So the three P's I mentioned here, which are minimizing plastic in your environment, minimizing pesticides, so looking into what kind of foods can or should I buy organically and what kind of foods don't I need to buy organically. And then the last one being parabens. So those are present in your skincare and cleaning products. And the reason for that is if they permeate our skin or if we're consuming those through food, they dock onto hormone receptors. And then the actual hormones that we have in our body that are supposed to be messengers from the brain, they just float around the bloodstream and don't have anywhere to go because their receptors are already taken. So essentially it results into an imbalance between the hormones that we actually have. And that's why we want to minimize those endocrine mimicking chemicals. Another one, which is really helpful for anybody's digestive system, is glutamine. I do like to see my female clients have consumed glutamine for the most part. That just helps with the gut lining. So I mentioned that many women are prone to a little bit of gut permeability, etc. And glutamine can help restore that gut lining. And it's very soothing. I know that you're a big advocate for glutamine, John. And I believe that's something that you recommend to most of your clients as well. Is that correct? Sort of 10, 20 grams per day?
I'm a real big believer in it. We sell it 400-gram bottles here at Fat Muscle Project, and I use it 20 grams a day. So I use 2 scoops before I train, 2 scoops out after. You can do 1 scoop is 5 grams, so you can do that, twice a day, 3, 4 times a day. But for gut health, my gut health has never been better. For the last year, I have just left that in and not changed anything else. Literally
Mm,
eating the same. So my gut health is just so much better. It's also a cell volumizer, so I like it around the workout. I like it before I train. It just helps deliver nutrients. It's not similar to creatine, but kind of the same mechanisms. And it's great for immunity too. So like to me, it's something I think we should all be taking, especially as we get older. I think it's just more important because as you get older and you eat like this for a lifestyle, especially high protein diets, your digestion can get thrown off.
mm.
So hormones start to tank and gut health starts to suffer as you get older as well. So it's like throw that in there. It's a nice, cheap alternative. So maybe start with 20 grams a day. Like it doesn't taste like anything and you're not going to be able to tell a difference. I just throw it in my pre-workout concoction that I drink, right? My non-stim pre-workout and creatine, I throw that in there as well. And then I have it after with my shake. So yeah, big believer in her.
Nice. Yeah, another thing for digestive health that I mentioned on here is fiber. And of course, we're most people are aware of the importance of fiber, mostly for gut motility, etc. Of course, it's also helpful for healthy cholesterol levels. But I think if we or when we get more into like the bodybuilding space, people tend to uh, do really, really well with the same meals every day. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I do say that we can still incorporate some variety even when we're on a more or less meal plan or when we're in a prep phase or so. And that might just be changing from broccoli from one week to the cauliflower the next week or the kale the week after that so that we get a bit of variety that way, or instead of just purchasing the raspberries for your breakfast oats, maybe get a mixture of berries, frozen berries, so that you have a little bit more of a um, gut microbiome diversity rather than just always eating the same things. And then when you come off of your quote unquote meal plan, your body is struggling to digest anything else. So that would be the recommendation, to keep amongst your staple meals, as great as they are, to include a little bit of variety in there so that you're not conditioning your body to only be able to digest these foods. Um, then the three last points that I have on here is I mentioned that most women, or many of the women that I work with, are really highly stressed. They are go, 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 go. Of course, the men as well. Don't want to underestimate that. But for women, it often shows up in the sense of weird constipation or digestive issues. There might be nothing has changed at all, and then they can't go to the bathroom 2, 3 days, and we talk, and suddenly it turns out they had a big deadline at work, or they're just emotionally stressed. They broke up with their boyfriend or so. So don't underestimate what the stress can do to your digestive health also. And we don't want you to be constipated, because if you have that stool sitting in your digestive tract, it's floating around there with all the toxins and stuff. It's not just uncomfortable, it's also not great for your body. So we do need to have regular bowel movements, incorporate more stress relieving techniques and yoga or parasympathetic work, like even if it's breath work, meditation. You're a big fan of walking. So am I. I think that's one of the best ways to free your mind, really. So make sure you include that. And another thing that I often see is that women that have taken hormonal birth control for years and years on end, 10, 15 years, maybe longer, they are very low in certain micronutrients because the pill tends to deplete us of certain micronutrients. For example, vitamin B, zinc, iron even, or iron can also be low because we bleed a lot, or just in general vitamin B might be low because we're more sort of vegan, or we don't like eating red meat. I don't find that issue very often with men. Most men that I work with or have known, they love red meat. So just pay particular attention to certain dietary patterns, and also pay particular attention to whether you or your client is getting in enough calcium, because we are just more prone to osteoporosis. So that's really something that we do want to pay attention to in our female clients or for ourselves. And most calorie trackers like MyFitnessPal or others, they give you, even if it's just a few micronutrients, but you can see how much calcium your client is consuming. So that would be something to look into, I would suggest, especially if you know that they're dairy free or whatever it might be. Um, and then lastly, and that always makes me feel like a little bit of a party pooper, but alcohol is just such a big stressor for the liver. And I mean, even digestively, sometimes once we've had alcohol, it's almost more like a laxative. So that's one thing, but it's not a great sign. It's a toxin that enters your body, and your body's preoccupied with getting rid of this toxin, and it's going to put everything else, including hormonal health, including detoxification from other things, on hold while it's trying to get rid of that toxin. So if your client is going through perimenopause or menopause and you've tried so many things and nothing seems to be working, I would highly recommend cutting out alcohol for a few months and seeing if that's going to make a difference. Is that something that you see in your female clients as well?
I literally hate alcohol. I hate it because it does nothing positive and it only gets in the way of your health and your physique enhancement goals, right? And it's not always just about how you look, bro. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to be that guy that's the bro that, wants you to walk around jacked and tan. It's not that. It's every single time somebody has more than one drink a week, and I don't even want to see people drink once a week. Like, I think it's the worst thing that you can do to your body. But anytime someone's drinking more than just one drink a week, and typically when they say they're drinking one a week, they're not. They're drinking two or three times a week. And normally it's wine in the evenings, two, three, four, 5 nights a week. It's beers on the weekend, but it gets in the way, and I can't get people results like they need to get them. And it's because cortisol just stays high and it's just brutal. So I am not a fan of alcohol for any kind of physique enhancement or health related goals, period. I'm just not.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I think is great is that we are moving away, or it's becoming clear to many people that there is literally zero upside aside from perhaps the social aspect to alcohol, because there used to be, especially, I don't know what it's like in the US, but especially here used to be this whole, oh, a glass of wine because in the blue zones, blah blah blah, they also drink wine, and there's some and whatever antioxidants in the, in order to get benefit from the antioxidants in wine, you'd have to drink like 3 liters or a gallon every day. That's, you honestly, you can eat a handful of blueberries to get the same amount of antioxidants. So that is not a positive upside to alcohol for sure.
It's not a stat because I don't have the stats in front of me, but I fix a lot of people's testosterone naturally, a ton. And the ones that I can't fix are if they're drinking alcohol. No matter what I do, I can do everything right. They can drop their training to 3 days a week. They can keep stress low. Like, they can take hormone optimizer and Cordy's and do all these things. If they're drinking, test levels won't come up. Every
Mhm.
single time, 100% of the time, I cannot get those levels up. Now, if I will, and guys are the ones that fight me on it the most. If they're drinking, believe it or not, I can't get their levels up. If I can get them to drop the alcohol, I'll see a 200 or 300 point increase in their test levels in 8 weeks. That's how powerful alcohol is on dropping your hormones. And that's just one hormone. It crushes progesterone, it crushes thyroid hormone, it raises cortisol constantly, it drops your testosterone and free T. We could do a whole podcast on this. I don't want to stay on my soapbox. If people could just understand how detrimental it is, like, just don't do it.
Yeah. No, I like that you're so clear about this. Honestly, this is a message more people need to hear, not just the women. So thank you for that. But yeah, the fourth point, and this is a little bit more controversial, is of course going into training. So there is a little bit of research indicating that number one, women can probably tolerate higher volumes than men, just on average, once again, and also that many women actually do a little bit better on um higher rep schemes and shorter rest than men. I mean, this again, there will be these powerlifter women saying that's not true. I like my 3 to 5 minutes rest in between, and I love my 3 to 5 reps, etc. But this is just on average. We're talking about higher volumes might be needed or might be tolerated better, and just in general shorter rest in between sets. I don't know exactly why that is in the sense of muscle structure or muscle fibers or whatever it is, but I would say also listen to the natural inclination of your client. Yes, many women might be coming from those class workout sessions where they do really high reps at light loads anyway. That's not what I'm talking about. We do want to transition those women into still working on progressively overloading and taking more rest than no rest that they're getting in the sets and in those classes. But just generally, I have found that many women are a little bit more leaning towards endurancey type things or not having as much rest in between, and over time they learn to appreciate the rest, and over time they learn to appreciate just in general feeling a pump or something like that, but it sometimes might take a little bit of time. I don't know if you've seen something similar with some of the women that come to you.
I definitely will agree with the higher volume. I have the best results that I've seen with women over the years have been higher reps, higher total volume. Not so much of the heavy training that really crushes the CNS, but the higher reps, and I mean training hard, a 9 out of 10
Oh
RP.
yeah.
Yeah, everything's training hard, right? So definitely the higher volume. And I've seen some women be able to bounce back and forth and do a lot of things where most guys, it definitely they have to stay in their zone. So
Yeah.
a perfect example, and she's an outlier, but I've seen quite a few women like Leslie who have been world champion powerlifters, IFBB pro, figure competitors, which is bodybuilding, elite CrossFit athletes. Like she's been to some pretty high level of CrossFit. She's done the MS 150 bike race, 150 miles in 2 days. She's ran marathons, like at the highest of levels. And I've seen, and that requires all different types of training. And I've been able to see progress out of someone like her and still build a great physique. So, and I've seen that more with women being able to do multiple things like that than I have guys. Why? I don't know, because women to me are also the ones that seem the higher cortisol goes, the harder it crushes their hormones. So it's kind of a fascinating thing to see, really. And I don't know why it is what it is. I think maybe a great person to have on to maybe talk about this, and I think he's gone even deeper, is our friend Dr. Bill Campbell, who I just saw on
Absolutely.
their podcast. I think this would be a fun conversation to have with him.
Amazing. We should absolutely invite him on. That would be really cool
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, a little note that I made on here too is just like the question, why do some people, some women like group fitness classes so much? And I don't know if that's the clientele that you deal with also, but many of the women that come to us, we first have to more or less convince that, hey, hypertrophy training, you should step back from just those group fitness classes because you're not actually progressively overloading. I do think that many of them like having instructions because especially if they're new to kind of to weights, and so they might be feeling lost with the machines or just in general, so it can be a good idea to have them do a personal training or have a personal trainer, or at least having a training app or some kind of training program to follow is always a good idea, not just for women but in general. I do think that they love that community aspect of just going somewhere and socializing. I don't necessarily see the same thing with many men. I think they're quite happy of training on their own in their own time and just doing their thing. And of course, another thing that's sort of more female energy is just loving music. Men also obviously love music and training to music, but you know, that movement to music. Some of these group fitness classes, like one beat and you pull it up and another beat and you push it up. So you have kind of that rhythm to go with. And while I don't want women to necessarily partake in those classes, I do think that it's very important that we make sure our clients are also having fun. So we've spoken about optimal versus good before. So while it might be optimal that your client trains a hypertrophy style training 5, 6 times per week or 5 times per week, if she loves those classes so much, let her go there like once or twice and do 3 proper training sessions of hypertrophy, even just for the enjoyment factor, for socializing with her friends, for dancing, or like whatever it is, even if it is not necessarily optimal. I think the enjoyment factor is super underrated just in general when it comes to training.
I agree 100%. And coming from an old bro like I am, who loves bodybuilding training and I love the gym, I have a lot of females that hire me that they're just trying to get into shape. They don't necessarily know their way around the weight room like the back of their hand. And there's these classes out there. There's Orange Theory and there's these other different classes that they can jump in and do. Now, are these classes going to build a ton of muscle and help get someone a sculpted physique like they want? Not necessarily. Like somebody that's new, they're probably going to add some muscle if protein's adequate. But if they're just trying to get into shape and they're trying to lose some pounds and they're trying to feel better and they enjoy this, by all means, knock these classes out, ladies. It all comes down to what you just said, and it comes down to the goal. But if you're someone that's wanting to build like a very, very muscular physique and that totally different type of training, right? So
Absolutely.
I'm a fan of enjoyment. Like a fan of movement. And as I've gotten older and wiser, I've not tried to like push everybody to one style of training. So I'm very open to this kind of stuff now.
Awesome. Cool. And the last one, I mean, everyone thrives on positive feedback in general, but I noted that as my fifth point because um, I think on average, guys might be quite all right with, you know, a bit more of a hard approach when it comes to coaching and just, hey, you know, last week, you know, you messed up, that wasn't good, you go and do it better. But with women, we sometimes have to work with a little bit of I call it the shit sandwich. You point out something positive, look for the positive, and then in the middle, squeeze in there, hey, but you know, you can do this and that better. That actually wasn't what we talked about. And then you end with something positive, and it goes such a long way. I personally, I know I'm very much someone who thrives on positive feedback, and this is a little side note here, but a couple of years ago, I tried to learn kiteboarding, and for anyone who's tried kiteboarding, it's very difficult even just getting a handle of the kite, and then you throw in the board, and then you throw in the waves. It was very stressful. But anyway, I had a great teacher the first couple of days, and I loved it. I had such a good time, and he was like always pointing out the things that I was doing well and so on. And then I had another teacher the third day. And I even said to her, hey, you know, I've really enjoyed my first couple of days, especially because of the positive feedback. I know I have a lot to learn, but I'm someone I do really do well with positive feedback. And this woman, for the life of me, she could not find a single thing I was doing well. It was like, no, not like this. No, overcorrected. No, this was bad. And after 2 hours, I said to her, if you're not changing your coaching style, I'm going to throw in the towel and I never ever want to do the sport again. I gave her another hour, and even though I paid ahead for 5 days, I stopped after this. And I'm not someone who usually quits anything, but this it made me cry and it made me hate the sport. So it's like it really, really depends. You need to find the right communication style for your client, but I think on average, most women are going to do quite well if you learn to point out the positive things, particularly because we also tend to be really hard on ourselves as well. Um, So a few other things that I've noted on here is sometimes as a coach, we also just need to be there to listen. I don't know if you get those kind of client check-ins, but often, we're supposed to be there for their nutrition and their training only. But of course, we develop a relationship with them, and every now and then they just need someone they can't dump on their kids, and maybe their husband or partner doesn't want to listen or is away or whatever. And so they just need someone who's a little bit out there who's not involved in their lives directly, and they then just let them dump, and afterwards they might have the greatest week again, and you'll have a client for life if you are able to create that connection and to create that space where they feel safe enough to share stuff with you outside of the nutrition and training realm. And of course, the nutrition training is going to get better because of that too, because you actually know that suddenly, okay, she didn't just eat 3,000 calories on Friday because she wanted to. She did that because of this stressor and that stressor, and then you can actually work on details like that. And a relationship like that is not necessarily created by you just talking that down on them or trying to fix everything that she's sharing with you. Often just sharing some personal anecdotes as well, or sharing your own struggles with certain things. And I think that can really go a long way. I think you actually do a really great job inserting your own anecdotes or like your own mistakes from the past as well, because that helps the people see, hey, you're just human and you had your issues in the beginning also.
Yeah, it's something to where I just know the best coaches are always going to be the ones that can connect with a client and talk to them. And here's the thing, we're not robots, right? People
Yes.
don't hire coaches to be robots. Now, some people are very type A, they're very driven. You give them a set of rules and a plan and something to execute, and they will go execute and they'll get it done, and they're okay like that. A lot of other people have questions. They have a lot of life stress they're going through. They are struggling sticking to the plan that you made for them. So the best coaches are always the ones that are asking questions to try and get this kind of feedback out of their clients. And then you tailor the plan and you make the changes, but you learn about that person as you go. So then when it comes to positive feedback or maybe some tough love or whatever the check-in is, you know how to tailor those check-ins to your client. So if I have Sally, if I'm working with Sally, this might be my reply to her check-in. She sends me a check-in and she's dropped 1.2 pounds for the week, which is perfect. She's gone from 128 to 126.8. And so I tell her, I say, hey, awesome work, you've hit some new lows, it's dropping. Our next goal is to hit 125. We should have that probably in the next 5 or 6 days. Awesome work, let's see where we're going on Thursday. And that's my check-in, and I point out the positive stuff because it's all positive. Now if she's up a pound and a half for the week, I start asking questions. And
Mhm.
once I figure that out and I figure out what went on or sleep slow or whatever, I give her feedback and then I tell her, hey, everything was going great. You were dropping well before this. Let's get things tightened back up. Let's get back on the plan. And I always end my emails with have an outstanding week. Like every
Mm.
email is, hey, let's see where we're at Thursday or let's see where we're at Monday. Have a kick-ass week. And that's where it ends, right? So like the best coaches are the ones that go into detail, but you learn how to interact with those clients. So there's time for
Ab-
tough love. Like I will straight jump in someone's ass, but I don't jump in their ass until I learn who they are and if they respond to that. If I'm going to make someone cry, they're not going to stay with me. They're going to go hire, they're never going to send someone to me, right? So there's a lot of times I will jump in someone's ass, but then I'll end it on a positive note with some smiley face emojis and be like, hey, we all struggle. Like, you think I haven't shit the bed on this before? I'm like, trust me, like 2 months ago, I shit the bed and this, and this happened. I'm like, you got this. Stay dialed in. I got you. Let's watch for a week and we got it. So there's right ways and wrong ways to do it. And you just get that with time.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, and more often than not, even if you have a tough love sort of talk, more often than not, you'll get back like, "Oh, thank you. I really needed that this week or so." But yeah, no, gauging who to speak to in what manner is super, super important. So yeah, thank you, John, for your input on this also. I'm happy that we kind of aligned on a lot of things even without speaking about that beforehand. But everybody else, if you have any questions about this presentation, of course, as always, drop it in the show notes or reach out to me or John, and we're always happy to answer questions. If you have any particular recommendations as for future episodes, also, we also love those. But yeah, John, is there anything else you'd like to add to the topic?
No, I think this was 5 great points. I think there's a whole bunch of small sub points, but it would probably take 3 hours to present on. I think you've hit everything in a nice macro view. And if you're trying to improve your coaching, you're going to have females coming to you at scale. Like that's the market, right? And as we all get older, and females get older, they need more and more help. So like it's going to dive into, there's weight loss resistance and there's metabolic resistance. There's all these issues that are going to be coming up. So it's kind of like, a hairdresser or a barber is never going to run out of people to help. We're never going to run out of female clients to help because I've just noticed as we've gotten older, they're the ones that need help the most. You guys have the most pressure on you to look a certain way. Like us guys, we don't have as much pressure, right? So, like, it's been that way for decades, unfortunately. There's all this undue pressure, but there's just a lot of females out there looking to hire coaches. So, I think these are 5 great tips. I think you did a great job on this.
Thank you.
We also have in our show notes our emails. If you ever want to send questions, topics, guests, just hit us up with anything. We're not going to add you to an email list. It's not how we roll. Send us questions and ideas. We'd love to chat with you. This has been a great presentation. We have a question of the week coming up next. It's going to be fun. So from Lisa and myself, we're out of here. See you guys.
See you.